The retired cowboy had lived alone so long that silence clung to him like dust on an old coat. His ranch sat far from town, a lonely stretch of dry land where the wind spoke more often than people ever did. The house was small, weather-beaten, and full of echoes from a life long gone. Tom Calder rose before sunrise every day, fed his horse, checked the fence line, and cooked his meals in quiet routine. He spoke to no one, not even himself. The past had taught him that solitude was safer than attachment. That evening, the sky burned orange and red as the sun sank behind the hills. Tom was just about to close his door when he heard footsteps, soft, cautious, unfamiliar. His hand moved to his rifle by instinct, not anger, not fear, just habit shaped by years on the frontier. He stepped onto the porch and scanned the yard. 5 women stood near the fence, thin silhouettes against the fading light. Their clothes were torn, their faces worn by grief and long travel. Even from a distance, Tom recognized who they were: Apache widows. Life had carved deep lines into their eyes, but it had not broken them. The oldest woman stepped forward slowly, her hands empty and visible. Her voice was low, steady, and tired. She said their camp had been destroyed, their husbands killed or taken, and the land around them had turned hostile. Winter was close, and they had nowhere left to go. She did not beg with tears or plead for mercy. She only asked for shelter, even if just for one night. Tom felt a tightening in his chest. Memories surfaced, raids, gunfire, screams carried on the wind, and choices he could never undo. Letting them stay could bring soldiers, neighbors, trouble he no longer had the strength to fight. Turning them away felt worse. He looked at their hollow cheeks, at the youngest barely standing upright, and at the quiet dignity they carried despite everything they had lost. The silence stretched until the wind filled it. Finally, Tom lowered his rifle and nodded toward the barn. He told them they could stay the night, nothing more promised. Relief washed over their faces, not loud or dramatic, just a shared breath released. As they followed him across the yard, the sound of their footsteps broke the stillness that had ruled his land for years. Tom didn't know it yet, but in that moment, his long isolation began to crack, and the lonely ranch took its first breath of change. Morning came softly to the ranch, carrying a chill that crept through the walls of the old house. Tom Calder woke before the sun, as he always did, but something felt different. The silence he was used to had shifted. There was movement outside, the faint crackle of firewood, the low murmur of voices. For a moment, he wondered if he had dreamed the night before, but when he stepped onto the porch, he saw the 5 Apache widows already awake and working. They did not wait to be told what to do. One woman knelt by the fire pit, coaxing flames from dry sticks. Another carried water from the well with quiet determination. The youngest swept the barn floor, her movements slow but careful, as if she wanted to earn her place with every step. Tom watched from a distance, unsure how to feel. He had offered shelter, not partnership, yet they behaved like people who had learned long ago that survival meant usefulness. Days passed and the women remained. They cooked simple meals and shared them without speaking much. Their food carried unfamiliar smells: corn, herbs, smoke, and for the first time in years, Tom found himself finishing every bite. The ranch itself seemed to wake up. Broken fence posts were set straight, torn blankets stitched, and the barn no longer felt abandoned. Tom tried to keep his distance, but their presence filled spaces he had forgotten were empty. Word spread faster than he expected. One afternoon, a neighboring rancher rode by and noticed strange tracks near the creek. Questions followed. Whispers traveled on horseback. Before long, 2 armed men appeared at Tom's gate, eyes sharp with suspicion. They asked him who he was hiding and warned him that soldiers were searching for Apache survivors in the area. Tom felt the old tension return, heavy and familiar. He stood firm, leaning on his rifle, and told them no harm would come from his land. The men studied his face, seeing not just an old cowboy, but someone who would not be easily pushed. After a long pause, they rode away, leaving a cloud of dust and an unspoken threat behind. That night the widows gathered near the fire. The oldest woman spoke again, saying they did not wish to bring danger to his home. If he asked, they would leave before sunrise. Tom stared into the flames. thinking of the quiet years behind him and the uneasy days ahead. At last he shook his head. He told them this land had seen enough loss and enough fear. As long as he stood, they could stay. Trust did not come all at once, but it grew with each shared day on the ranch. The widows and Tom settled into a quiet rhythm shaped by necessity and respect. Mornings began with work, not words. Fences were checked, horses tended, and water hauled before the sun climbed too high. In that steady routine, suspicion slowly gave way to understanding. Tom noticed how each woman carried her grief differently, some in silence, others in soft songs sung while working, but none allowed sorrow to stop them. One widow, tall and sharp-eyed, showed a natural way with horses. She calmed a nervous mare with little more than her voice and gentle hands, something Tom himself had struggled to do. Watching her stirred a sense of admiration he had not felt in years. Another woman carried knowledge passed down through generations. When Tom's hands swelled with pain from old injuries, she prepared warm poultices from herbs gathered near the creek. The relief surprised him, but more surprising was how much he trusted her to touch wounds he rarely acknowledged. In return, Tom shared what he knew. He taught them how to handle a rifle safely, how to track movement in open land, and how to spot danger before it arrived. He made it clear that these lessons were not for revenge, only survival. The women listened closely, absorbing every word. Their gratitude was quiet but sincere, shown through action rather than speech. The peace was broken one night by the sound of hooves pounding the earth. Soldiers rode onto the land without warning, their lanterns cutting sharp lines through the darkness. Accusations followed, harsh and loud. They claimed Tom was hiding enemies of the state. The widows stood behind him, unarmed, their faces calm but resolute. Tom stepped forward, his voice steady despite the tension pressing on his chest. He spoke of loss, of how war left nothing but graves and bitterness. He said these women were widows, not warriors, and that killing kindness would not bring peace. The standoff stretched long enough for fear to settle deep. Finally, the officer gave a sharp command, and the soldiers withdrew, unwilling to spill blood over an old man and 5 grieving women. When the dust settled, Tom realized something had shifted. The ranch was no longer just his shelter from the world. It had become a place of protection, built not on force, but on shared humanity. Winter came hard and early, rolling across the plains with bitter wind and cutting cold. Snow settled along the fence lines and gathered on the roof of the house, testing both the land and the people who lived on it. Yet the ranch did not fall silent. Fires burned longer, meals were shared closer together, and the walls echoed with quiet conversation and occasional laughter. For Tom Calder, the cold no longer felt as heavy as it once had, because he no longer faced it alone. The widows worked as they always had, refusing to be defeated by the season. They patched clothing, stored food, and kept the animals alive through the worst storms. When sickness came, they took turns keeping watch through the night. Tom, who had once accepted pain and loneliness as unchangeable facts, found himself cared for in ways he never expected. When his cough worsened, warm broth appeared at his side. When old nightmares woke him before dawn, someone was always awake, feeding the fire and sitting nearby in silent understanding. As the months passed, the land slowly responded to their presence. When spring finally arrived, green shoots pushed through the soil where nothing had grown in years. The widows planted a small garden near the house, working the earth with patience and hope. Tom watched them from the porch, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. The ranch no longer felt like a place waiting to be abandoned. It felt alive. Travelers occasionally passed by, drawn by rumors of a safe place far from towns and soldiers. They spoke of an old cowboy who had opened his land to those with nowhere else to go. Children sometimes visited, laughing as they chased each other across the fields, their voices carrying farther than the wind ever had. Tom realized that without planning it, he had helped create something rare, a refuge built on trust instead of fear. At night, stories were shared by firelight. The widows spoke of ancestors, lost homes, and lessons meant to survive even the darkest times. Tom shared his own memories, the mistakes that had haunted him for decades. No one judged, no one turned away. In the quiet of those evenings, Tom understood that sheltering those 5 widows had given him more than purpose. It had given him family, and in doing so, it had finally given his long, lonely life peace.